G'day guys, how you doing? It's the Kiwi and I'm back with another video. And as the title says below, what happened to Dr. Jordan Peterson? The reason I'm doing this video is primarily because of the fact that over the last couple of months, and I don't really know why, there's been a lot of Jordan Peterson videos showing up in my feed on YouTube, and they're just regular videos of the doctor's works over the last number of years, where people are just taking video clips and putting them into their channels, etc, etc, etc. Now, the interesting thing for me though is going to the comments section and actually reading the comments. There's a lot of goodwill out there, wishing the dear doctor a speedy recovery, and hope he's doing well, all the regular stuff. However, there is a large amount of bewilderment. A lot of people out there actually wondering what happened to Dr. Jordan Peterson, actually missing him, actually hoping he's going to put videos out there, actually hoping that he's going to make a return, and all this sort of stuff. And so I wanted to do a video, one, explaining probably what the doctor's actually going through, and two, if he is going through this stuff, that don't expect him back anytime soon. Because what's happened with Dr. Jordan Peterson, from my own personal standpoint, is that his shadow literally came up, bubbled up, grabbed him by his ass, and has literally pulled him down into the dim, dark depths of the bowels of hell. Now, the reason why I say this is, for myself personally, for many years now, for 16 years, I've been doing shadow work, like legitimate shamanist style shadow work. I was very fortunate in July of 2004 to have been able to meet an incredible basically therapist, but this therapist was more of a shaman in all honesty. And I had been going through a divorce. There had been some stuff happen, and fortunately I was already seeing this woman, and it could have been a male therapist. Shamans can be male and female, it doesn't matter. Fortunately, I'd already been seeing Beverly, and what had happened was I had an incident, and I was literally on the verge of taking my own life. So for the first couple of weeks, I was on suicide watch, and I was actually doing work with Beverly on a pretty much day-to-day basis. And then after a couple of weeks, it was down to a couple of times a week. And then for about 2.5 to 3 years, it was once a week, and then it blended out into a couple of times a month, and then once a month. However, I continued doing the work all the way up until 2010. I'd be on the phone to her, make contact, do some shadow work with Beverly. And then, because you can do it over the phone, you don't actually have to be sitting in an office, in a therapist's office or anything like that. The soul, the spirit, the energy has an ability to be able to, you can contact people all over the world. You can do this work all over the world. You don't necessarily, in the first stages, you do have to be in the care of a shaman. But after years of doing the work and knowing how to do the work, you can actually go off and do it yourself. So that's one part of the reason why you're probably not going to be seeing Dr. Jordan Peterson for a long time, is if he is truly doing legitimate shadow work, he needs to be solely and wholly focused on himself for a very long time. And we're talking at least, for the depth of work that Jordan's going to have to be doing, I would say don't expect to see or hear anything from him for at least a year, maybe a year and a half. and then he's not going to put himself out there. He will be very, very cautious in how he approaches this stuff. I hope, I truly, truly hope, because this is the only way that you can actually heal yourself. You have to be very, very careful dipping back into your addictions. And believe it or not, Jordan's being out there and helping all you guys was actually part of his addiction. So we're going to talk about that from this point on in regards to how the shadow actually forms inside a human being, how it comes to be, and how these addictions can actually take control of you. So for that, we have to go to the whiteboard of truth. Alrighty, so here's an average Joe human being. So how does this individual end up with this hell living inside of us? How does this shadow form inside a human soul? Okay, so this is what I'm going to explain to you, and I know a lot of you are going to have a hard time believing this. I know a lot of you are going to think this is absolutely whacked out stuff. However, I need to say this. This is where the old stories of like Achilles and the Battle of Troy came from. This is where the stories of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table came from. The ancient people, or what we called ancient people, they knew about this stuff and they wrote about it, and they wrote about it in great depth. The problem is today, this aspect of who we are as a human being has been completely and utterly dismissed. It's a part of who we are that's been forgotten. Okay? We as a human being, we are a trinity. Okay? We have a mind, a body, and a soul. Okay? We say that all the time. Mind, body, and soul. Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. You ain't going to believe this one. Israel. That's straight up. Israel. 3 ancient gods. That was a teaching of an ancient version of the Trinity. Not a country, not a place, a teaching. Okay? Well, in today's society, we've given a lot of credence to the mind. We've given a lot of effort to the body. But what about the soul? What about the soul here? How much credence do we give to the soul in today's society? Pretty much none. Absolutely, unequivocally none. And this is where your shadow forms. You see, how we are born into this world, it's a real trip. I died when I was 24. I've experienced the other side. I was put back in my body. I understand this stuff intrinsically. Then on top of doing the shadow work that I've done, I know this stuff inside and out. So we, as human beings, live in a completely separate realm to the rest of the entire whatever it is that's out there that runs everything. This is the veil. It's a veil that is before us. And above us, this is the heavenly realm. This is where all the wonderful feelings and all this incredible stuff come from. Now what happens is, as a human being, when we are being brought into this world, our soul is dropped from the God's heavenly realm. This is where the whole all-seeing eye comes from, up here. That's all it means. That's all the all-seeing eye means. It's just God's watching over you. That's it. God, universe, creation, nature, whatever you want to call it. So your energy is dropped down into the mother's womb. Okay? Now what happens is, when we're dropped down into this realm, we are cut off from the heavenly realm. And what that does is it leaves a hole in our soul. No different to when we are actually cut away from our mother after birth with our umbilical cord. It leaves a hole in our stomach, our belly button. Okay? So that's kind of a physical representation of we have a physical hole when we are removed from our mother, and we have a spiritual hole when we are cut off from the heavenly realm, cut off from the Father. Now what happens is this leaves a little dark spot. It leaves a hole in our soul. Now believe it or not, and this is factual, many infants, when they're born into this world, have a physical manifestation of this hole in their soul, in their heart. They have a hole in their heart. Now, depending on how much unconditional love, nurturing, caring that the actual individual will get will depend on if this hole will vanish and go away, or if it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, what causes this hole in our soul to get bigger and bigger and bigger? Okay. Violence. In the first 5 to 10 years, how much verbal abuse, how much physical abuse, violence, beatings, being yelled at, being emotionally abused, mentally abused, okay? All these things, everything that takes away from the love causes this hole in our soul to grow bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now what happens is it can become an all-encompassing part of our lives, unfortunately, and it can end up controlling who we are. So, as in the first 5 to 10 years, we have no clue what's going on inside of us. So what happens is we head out into the world as teenagers, young adults, and we end up experiencing certain negative side effects from this hole in our soul that's becoming overwhelmingly controlling of who we are. And this is the shadow. Carl Jung was right when he said, the path to heaven is through hell. Because to get to the other side, you have to be able to heal this aspect of yourself. So what actually leads to, or what are some of the symptoms of this huge hole in our soul? What are the symptoms here of this hole in our soul when we head out into the world to become, or try to become adults? Well, this is where addictions come from. This is where alcohol addictions come from. This is where drug addictions come from. And it can be any form of drug. It doesn't have to be illicit drugs. It can be over-the-counter drugs. It can be pharmaceutical drugs. Okay? And take note of that. All right? Because that's one of the issues that the doctor had. He had a real problem with over-the-counter drugs. Okay? It can be sex. An addiction to sex. It can be an addiction to power, control, money. You name it. All of this stuff here and more can be attributed to the shadow, to this hole in our soul. It is also where you see a lot of professional athletes, workaholics. You'll see professional athletes where they want to be something, they want to prove something to the world, they want to go out there and they feel like they deserve something in life, okay? Look at the amount of professional athletes, Hollywood movie stars, musicians, that once they stop being fed this fame, they literally fall off the face of the earth. They commit suicide, they lose all their money, they become drug abusers, alcohol abusers, sex abusers, power and control. This this can fall into the category of just being incredibly manipulative, narcissistic, all this sort of stuff. So what unfortunately happened with Dr. Jordan Peterson was his shadow became all controlling over who he was as an individual. And here's the reality of the situation. He actually told us, he genuinely told us exactly what was going on with him. And he said early on that he was a self-described or self-prescribed media whore. Well, that's wanting to be somebody. That's no different to being a rock star, a movie star, a professional athlete. He was wanting to be out there, and he was feeding off all that energy that he was getting from you young guys and gals. So what happens is, the more of this stuff, like you'll see people with alcohol addiction, what they're trying to do is they're feeding this darkness that's inside of them. They're pouring alcohol into themselves. The drugs, they're pouring into themselves. The sex, they're pouring into themselves. The power, control, and manipulation, all that stuff, they're pouring all this stuff into this void that's inside of them. And here's the reality of this, and this is the God's honest truth. The reality of the situation is that as the light and the world that we live in and the whole entire universe, as much light and goodness that's in the entire universe, as infinite as that is, so is the darkness. The darkness is infinite. Okay? And here's the reality, is that it doesn't matter how much stuff you pour into this, the hole gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until there's some form of existential crisis that happens in your life. And sadly, and I do genuinely mean sadly, Jordan's existential crisis was his wife becoming ill with cancer. However, and this is where the real sad part of it actually starts, he wasn't willing to stop what he was doing. He wasn't willing to stop doing his lectures. He wasn't willing to stop doing his tours. He wasn't willing to stop any of this stuff. Because primarily, even though a lot of people were getting a huge amount of help from Jordan putting out his knowledge and his information, at the same end of the scale, he was actually also feeding off your energy. He was feeding off the fame. He was feeding off the fortune. And this is where his addiction to money comes from. He actually, even though money is a good tool, one of the dark sides of Peterson that I personally saw was his addiction to money. Okay? Then he was working so hard, he had an addiction to work. Sadly, his real big addiction was drugs. I mean, in all sincerity, and I do mean this sincerely, please don't get angry with me. He genuinely had no business helping anybody until he was actually able to help himself. And that's part of the reason why I don't believe you're going to see him for quite a while. So you start having when you start having these major addictions, okay, and they're feeding into this shadow, what happens is when an existential crisis shows up, and he was masking his shadow with the drugs. The drugs were the part that was really masking it, okay? But what happens is you can't hide the shadow. It will tell you, it will percolate to the surface, and it will tell you exactly what is going on with a human being. It will tell an old warhorse like myself who's done years and years and years of legitimate shadow work. You can see it in people You can see how it percolates out into the world. And when there's an existential crisis, what happens is it just triggers, it just opens up this wound where you've been trying to mask it with all this stuff. It just opens up this wound inside of yourself, and it just comes, it just blows out, it just bursts. And it bursts out through that last little glimmer of light in your soul. It just bursts out through that. And that's where it jumps up and takes you and just pulls you down. And I mean, it pulls you down and just, it is the most debilitating thing that you could ever possibly go through. You feel completely powerless. You can feel completely helpless because your world has become just a pit of darkness. And it's so all-encompassingly terrifying that the only thing that you want to do is to end your life. You want to exit this world. You want to get away from it. So sadly, and I genuinely mean sadly, this is what I believe has actually happened to Jordan Peterson. So what I'm going to do is in the next video, I'm actually going to talk about how you go about healing this aspect of yourself. And it doesn't happen overnight. There's no drug, there's no miracle cure, there's no going to Peru and drinking ayahuasca and thinking that you're going to come out being some sort of shaman or anything like that. Just to get the fundamental basics down takes months, if not years, to actually get this stuff right. And sadly, in today's modern society, we've all been led to believe that we can take some sort of miracle, some sort of miracle drug's going to cure it. Having the house of our dreams is going to cure it. Having the fame and the fortune and all the money in the world's going to... None of this stuff. Nothing in this world. Nothing man-made. No material item. Nothing that is conjured up by humanity, by man, is going to cure this. For this to go away, for this to start being wiped away, you literally have to start reconnecting with this. And that's what I'll talk about in the next video, is just how bringing this into your life. And it's not religious BS. It's not nothing to do with the religion. It's all about pure energy, the light. So I hope this has helped some of you in some way, shape or form. I genuinely hope that Jordan himself actually has the opportunity to actually see this stuff, because there are people out there like myself that can actually help people like Jordan actually work through this, to actually repair his soul, to actually bring light back into his life, to actually help him reconnect with himself. And that would be an incredible gift to the world, because if this man was actually able to reconnect with himself at a deeper spiritual level and actually utilize that knowledge on top of the knowledge that he's already had, now you'd be talking about somebody that would have a real gift for society, in all honesty. So the work that I'm doing here is out of sincerity for the doctor. I genuinely hope he has a speedy recovery, or is at least doing well, because this is something that, like I said, I don't wish upon my worst enemy. I really truly don't. So I hope this has helped some of his followers in some way, shape or form. So yeah, other than that, till the next video, make it great. And I won't put another video out immediately. I'll let you absorb this. I'll let you research it. What I'm telling you is 100% the God's honest truth. So until next time, make it great. Cheers.